one, 7 straight audits missed by the Pentagon. Military recruitment down year after year, decade after decade. Can this be fixed at the Department of Defense? Can this be fixed in the United States of America? With the founder of Blackwater, Erik Prince. 2, 4 charts. Quite honestly, we've been beating the drum about here, now being recognized, that show exactly how far the shift to the left has been in America with Hotep Jesus. 3, I did it. I bought the mugshot sweatshirt. I bought the fight, fight, fight t-shirt. What's the most iconic photo in history? It is the Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page, terrestrial radio, market to market, on demand. If you just hit subscribe at Apple or Spotify, then you can jump into the comments section, leave us a 5-star review if you think it's so deserved, and listen to the Will Cain Show on your time. Joining us every Monday through Thursday is what you need to do over on foxnews.com and Facebook and YouTube. Just subscribe on YouTube, and you can jump into the comments section and become a member of the militia. This morning, I was on the Patrick Bet David podcast. Awesome experience in Florida. So I hope if you're new to the Will Cain Show, you hang out. You're going to have good conversations. We're going to have some fun. We hope you become a member of the militia. I'm off to Alabama. When you get appointed Secretary of Defense, you leave a lot of jobs on the table. So I'm going to be picking cotton tomorrow in Alabama with Redland Cotton, picking up the slack left by my buddy Pete Hegseth. But he's got a big job in front of him, reforming the Pentagon. So let's talk about the most iconic photo in history a little bit later on the Will Cain Show. By the way, is it Tiananmen Square? Is it Burning Man? Is it Ali knocking out Sonny Liston? Is it Ali Frazier? Is it Donald Trump? Fight, fight, fight. That coming up a little bit later on the Will Cain Show. But let's get into the reformation of the Pentagon with story number 1. He is the founder of private military contractor and company Blackwater. He also founded, by the way, the Unplugged phone, which you could check out at unplugged.com. And he also hosts Off the Leash with Erik Prince, the author of Civilian Warriors, Erik Prince, on the Will Cain Show. What's up, Erik?
Will, how you doing? Nice to be here.
I'm doing well. I'm glad to have you here. So, Erik, you and I've had some fascinating and deeper conversations, I think, about what's going on the world stage, which we need to get into today. But if I sat here and started our conversation today with, what is the most important thing that needs to be done inside the Department of Defense, what would you identify?
It's not even about gear. It's always about people. I would rather have a few lions than a whole lot of sheep. And I think if you think back to George Marshall became Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army September 1, 1939, literally the same day that the Nazis invaded Poland. And he immediately set to work firing lots of generals and colonels, clearing out the deadwood who were fully prepared to fight the last war, World War I, trench warfare and the like. And he actively sought to immediately prepare the U.S. military for the fight that was coming. The next SecDef, and I really hope it's Pete Hegseth, must prepare the U.S. military to do the same. The revolution in warfare that's occurred even since the Russians invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, the explosion of drone use, the automation of warfare, everything can be precision targeted now, means that hundreds of billions of dollars of our installed stuff is outdated and is just a target. And on top of that, we've had a leadership class of the U.S. military, which has kind of been getting fat and getting used to doing things the old way and still wanting to fight the global war on terror approach to fighting against a very unsophisticated enemy, wearing flip-flops and operating out of the hills versus preparing for a significant state competitor that has lots of innovation and lots of industrial might to throw at us. We are in a very, very dangerous place right now, and it requires swift, sudden, and I would say severe leadership adjustment to prepare our military because we depend on that as a society to defend. Everything that's in the past is not guaranteed to happen in the future. So for the smug American elites that think that, well, we'll always just win a war, that is exceedingly dangerous, especially since they are not the ones that have generally served, nor is it their kin that are serving in harm's way who would be the first to suffer from their exceedingly bad woke decisions.
I want to talk about this. You'd rather have 10 lions than 100 sheep, the personnel problem. The way I see it, and I hear you describing it, Erik, I can almost see it on three levels. There is the man and woman, for that matter, joining the military and fighting the wars, our actual war fighters. Then there's decision makers, and we need to separate them on a separate level of those who have been influenced or placed wrongly at the top because of DEI, non-merit-based initiatives. But I want to start with the third layer, which is the career military man, the career general. I've heard that a lot, what you said, Erik, about we always fight yesterday's war. We're fighting wars 10 years ago. Technologically and strategically, we're not looking forward. The leadership class that is gearing our military towards wars from the past, is that a product of simply a lack of vision, A, defense contractors that have the ability to continue to sell yesterday's equipment, and it's hard and expensive to develop tomorrow's equipment? Or is it, C, this type of person, and I've had this conversation with various individuals, that the military in and of itself, Erik, is not merit-based. I can speak to a lot of companies in America that also satisfy this definition, meaning they're in it not to lose, they're not in it to win. You are populated at the top by people who don't want to lose their jobs. And as such, they make decisions that are risk-averse. And the way you get promoted is by just sticking around. Like, you just stick around, you don't get fired, you don't jump the line either, so that the people that get to the top are survivalist. I've heard Donald Trump talk about this. Or they're just thoroughly indoctrinated into bureaucracy over a lifetime of what's doing necessary to promote. I kind of want to get into that class because, for example, if Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense and he needs to reform that leadership class, how deep, how broad is the problem? How many generals have to be fired at DOD?
At the beginning of World War II, like I talked about, they cleared house of a lot of deadwood generals preparing for the old war. We never did that in Global War on Terror. Nobody has been fired, not even for being not innovative, but for failure. So you have a culture of no accountability that must be reinstalled in the U.S. military. As for the lack of technological innovation, I mean, you've heard of a Gatling gun, right? The 6 or 8 barrel multi-barrel fast firing cannon that was first developed in the American Civil War by a guy that developed corn planters, Richard Gatling. He took it to the chief of U.S. Army Ordnance, and who said, "Why would I want a gun that used so much ammunition?" But Gatling persisted, and he did a demonstration, a live fire for Lincoln on the National Mall in front of the White House. They finally made him buy it on the spot. The same with aircraft. The Wright brothers developed the aircraft. Magnificent success. They took it to the U.S. military and said, why would we need aircraft? We have balloons for artillery spotting. So being bureaucratic and always thinking about what was done in the past, not what's in the future, is the way of any large-scale bureaucracy. But ours is compounded by the fact that we've thrown more money at it than in any organization in human history, and it's re-insulated fat layer upon fat layer upon fat layer, which really needs to be thinned out severely to make it effective. There are great leaders in the military that manage, look, we still have the best E5s and O3s of any military in the world. That I believe. The problem is they get sick and tired of being led by lambs instead of by lions, and so they end up leaving. There's an enormous pool of very capable people that will fight to defend America if it came to it, but they're not in positions of responsibility right now. So again, it is a leadership challenge. I think Pete is up to the job. He will certainly need help because it's a full court press, but this is a very, very serious threat. And at the geopolitical level, Trump's got to get the Ukraine war settled to pull Russia away from the orbit of China. all at those levels. But the U.S. military must be prepared to fight tonight, and it is not. And you're right about getting rid of the culture of diversity and all the rest. And he must focus on lethality, lethality, and lethality.
Just as a diversion, I'm going to come back to what we are defining of the problems and, in essence, the job for Pete Hegseth at DOD. But as a quick diversion into current events, I saw reports, Eric, today, I believe North Korea's sending, was it 100,000 troops to help Russia? And Biden has authorized Ukraine to use long-range missiles, weapons to attack Russia. We're in this transition period focused domestically. Where are we right now in the world and how fragile everything is when it comes to war?
We are not in a great place. The U.S. weapon systems are not in high demand in Ukraine because a lot of the stuff doesn't work. If they expose ATACMS, which is the long-range missile they want to use, the Russians are going to have a chance to intercept it, to read that RF, that electronic signature from it, and figure out how to jam it. The deep strike by ATACMS missiles is not going to change or fix the war. I think the North Korean troops are largely cannon fodder. I'd say that's more of a financial deal and financial incentive for Kim to sell more weapons. But again, it is definitely the interest and the policy of the United States to get that war settled, because a Russia that is in a subservient role to China is a very, very dangerous place for the United States and the West. And I spoke to a leader who had been at every BRICS meeting, okay, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia convention of countries. And he said all the previous BRICS meetings, it was definitely parity between Putin and Russia. But this last time, where they just met last month in Russia, there was definitely more of a subservience of Russia to China, and that is exceedingly dangerous for us. We do not want, it was always for 100 years the policy to keep German industry away from Russian resources. And now all we've done is push Russian resources into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Dumb, and dangerous.
Let's go back to our sort of diagnosis of the problem and checklist of priorities for Pete Hegseth, should he be confirmed, and we think that he will be confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. That second layer of bureaucracy, he's talked a lot about it, Eric, the DEI woke initiatives, the non-lethality initiatives. I wonder how much this is driven by a small pool of people. I wonder how wide that problem is. I know it's at the military colleges, Eric. I know it's at West Point. I know it's at the Naval Academy. I also wonder, and I know it's in lower level units, but how much of that is responding to incentive that is driven by a small pool of people in the leadership class? Meaning, is this something that is solved by a few targeted firings? Can it be cut out surgically and then re-in-place an incentive structure that the rest of the military follows back to lethality?
Yes and no. I would say yes. There's the leadership of that religious sect, and that's really what it is, have to be dismissed from U.S. military service. They can go do something else, but they don't have to be standing on the wall defending the country. But I'm concerned at the lack of moral courage of the senior enlisted, the mid-grade officers, and the senior officers for allowing that nonsense to go on to say, BS, not on my watch. I will not allow this to happen. There's been no resignations out of disgust, or maybe a few, not nearly enough of people saying no. I mean, this is supposed to be a tough, independent thinking, morally courageous set of officers, and we haven't seen that. I mean, look, the only guy that was punished for all things bad in Afghanistan was Stuart Scheller, who was man enough to call BS and demand accountability on the really, really failed officers that allowed that massive international embarrassment, a century embarrassment that will hang around our neck for decades.
One of the things that I really appreciated about getting to know Pete over my life is his clear-eyed vision on the mission, which is to create the world's most lethal fighting force in defense of the United States of America. In his clear-eyed vision of that, he doesn't let anything get in the way of that simple, although hard to do, but simple purpose-intended mission of the U.S. military. And so that can that can lead to what seems like controversial statements that he said very openly, but he owns, for example, that he does not believe that women should be on the front lines of combat. I saw, I believe it was one of the first female Marines that led an all-female Marine force into Iraq. This was on Instagram, and she's now like a celebrity influence, celebrity exercise influencer, Eric. And when I first saw it and somebody sent it to me, I was like, oh boy, here we go. And then I listened to it, and she gave this like long speech where basically she said, I agree with Pete Hegseth. I did this. I fought. I led. And I see the problems. And she said, there will always be exceptions to any rule, but as a general rule, this is not what makes us the most lethal fighting force.
Let me be clear on that one. The Marine Corps did an absolute measured test at Fort Irwin, California, of an all-male Marine unit, a blended unit, male-female, and an all-female unit in a combat exercise. And they put GPSs and heart rate monitors and everything on every soldier to measure their performance, everything from the firing rate for artillery pieces to how quickly they could put up a camp to refueling, rearming, repairing tanks. Okay, all that stuff is heavy. It requires actual physical strength. And in the performance, the performance metrics were not even remotely close. And so if we're going to have a military that is solely focused on being lethal, that's what we must focus on. Be focused on what those metrics are, not on someone's diversity or their childhood. I don't care if a little girl always dreamed of being a tank driver. Some things maybe are not meant to be. Maybe I dreamed of being a ballerina. Not going to work for me either.
It's a good way to put it in first person. I don't know, Eric. Maybe you could have been a ballerina. Yeah, I don't want to put anything beyond you. But if I'm placing the bet on Polymarket, I'm not saying ballerina Erik Prince. All right, then there's the third level. That's the third level when we take it down to the lower level soldier. And this is where the job, I think, is big. And also, again, I think well-suited for Pete Hegseth. And that's the recruitment efforts that we've had, the failures, the difficulties that we've had for quite some time in the United States military, Eric. Like I feel like we do it on Fox and Friends on definitely an annual basis, but the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy, missing targets year after year on the number of people signing up to serve. Now, I am sure that is a complicated equation on many levels when it includes career prospects and personal ambition, pay options for a lot of individuals. But, I think certainly as someone who's got to be around guys like you, around guys like Bear Hamlin, who was a Navy SEAL I was with this weekend, around guys like Army vet Pete Hegseth, it needs to be more attractive through mass culture, popular culture, and ultimately more attractive across culture in the United States. And I think that's the problem when we get to that third tier. We're not getting enough good men to sign up to serve. And I do think that can be affected by Pete Hegseth.
I agree. Two things. One, we have a vastly too tail heavy of a military. And when I say tooth is the lethal pointy end part of the military, the tail is like 12 times the size of the teeth. That's grotesque and it can be fixed. Two, there are lots of very, very talented people that would serve in the military. I think there's a lot more can be done with a guard and reserve capability where people would join and go hard for 2 years and then be out in a guard capacity where they get to go do commando stuff for 1 or 2 months a year, and the rest of the month they're in a regular career. That is a healthier, more effective, cost-effective mix. I've talked to a lot of special operations, like the 19th and 20th group SF guys said, man, they would much rather have guardsmen in their 40s or 50s who are doing regular careers because of the actual diversity of skill sets and maturity that they bring to the mission was phenomenal and innovative, and it increased their lethality. Cutting a lot of the nonsense out of training will attract more and more of the right people. And yes, the culture supporting that and making it something that was expected. I served in the military. I have family members that are serving in the military because they're not going to do it for a career, but it's something that people regard as a payment back to the republic for the pleasure of living in the United States of America. Citizenship should mean something, and I have nothing but great experience, great memories of the time I served, and I think that's the case of most people. But the other thing that will help recruiting is a promise to not be half-assed in how we go to war anymore. There's no half measures. You're not going to have to call a lawyer sitting 1,000 miles away in a cubicle, in an air-conditioned cubicle, for permission to drop a bomb on your enemy's head anymore. That is a unserious way. That is made. Those rules are made by elites sitting in Washington that never have to live with the nonsense of their decision making. That's playing at war, not being at war.
You know, I have to own this to start in this conversation. I didn't serve, and I have said on many occasions. By the way, both of these regrets that I have two great regrets in life, and both of these regrets have been influenced by Pete Hegseth. I believe that when I lay my head down for the last time in this life, I will regret, A, not having more children. I have two. I wish I had more. It's really the greatest thing in life. And B, that I didn't serve the United States of America. Now, I think that I have thought about this, and I know it doesn't serve the purpose of the mission, which is to create the most lethal fighting force on the face of the planet. But compelled service, Eric, there's something to that I find fascinating, that it creates a society with a common thread. Everybody has some base level of investment in the United States of America if you have to give 2 years, say, to some type of service. But I know that's not the purpose. We're not trying to create a more cohesive society. We're trying to create a more lethal fighting force. But that's pretty fascinating what you said about different ways to get people to serve, that a life of reservist or guardsman commitment actually creates people, because of their career diversity, that create a more lethal fighting force than maybe compelled service or even a young I think it's always been something we've been proud of, that we have a voluntary fighting force, but a young force that comes in because it's what they need to do for money, or because that's what the best options are in their career at that point in time. I think it is interesting to get creative about how you get men back into the military.
I think there could be some admissions preference to certain elite universities that would come with military service. Certainly, other financial benefits for having served, for college, for healthcare, for down payment for a house, whatever. I think there's a lot of creative ways, especially when you cut. And I'm not saying about increasing defense spending. I think we can cut defense spending and actually improve the quality of the force, improve the quality of lethality by cutting away the fat and the nonsense, because the fat and the nonsense drives away your most lethal people.
All right, we've bounced around this. In laying out the priorities now and talking through the problems, you've suggested this in the course of the conversation, but I want to ask it directly. As we talk about this, do you believe that Pete Hegseth is the right man to address these problems and reorganize the priorities of the United States military at the Department of Defense?
Yes, I do. Look, he's right. Younger. That's wonderful. It is time. I want a SecDef who has actually had to live to feel in battle the bad choices made in Washington and by the senior officers above them. So there is that level of disdain for the status quo, because the status quo is absolutely untenable and will lose us in the next war. So we need that level of focus and vigor to fix the problem, because he's doing it for his brothers that he also served with. It cannot be another Beltway type person. And woe be it unto the senators that think they're smarter than the hundreds of thousands of veterans that have actually served, that are not going to put up with this nonsense any longer. If you want a military that's going to plummet in recruiting and push back, do that.
Well, the cost of your recommendation is that I won't have a running buddy, obviously on Fox, but I also won't have somebody to swim with me across the Hudson, do push-ups and pull-ups and hang with Navy SEALs. So the price you'll have to pay, Eric, is I'll see you next August.
Come on. Whoa, come on.
Well,
why wouldn't Pete do that? I did the first one. And I think Pete could do that too as SecDef.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, well, my cost to you was you're going to have to do it again. It's been long enough since you've done the first one. You're going to have to come back this coming August. But you're right. Like, get a security detail, Secretary, Mr. Secretary, and we'll see you in the Hudson.
He could put some frogmen on his detail. He'd be just fine.
I think that's right. I think you're one of the safest places you can be from everything except a slight cold, maybe a skin infection from the Hudson, is with a bunch of Navy SEALs and other servicemen as you swim across the Hudson to Manhattan. Maybe one
experience.
Of which will also be Erik Prince.
I'll never forget getting in the water and swimming up, and I'm head down, swimming hard against the tide, and then I look up, and there is the Statue of Liberty looking straight up at me. Looking straight up. It was just absolutely a great American moment that I will never forget.
It's incredible. Yeah, and you're right. Why not, Mr. Secretary? All right, Erik Prince, the founder of Blackwater, the unplugged phone here on The Will Cain Show. Always like having you on, Erik. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing The Will Cain Show.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. Keep fighting.
All right. You can catch Erik as well at Off Leash with Erik Prince, or check out his book, Civilian Warriors. Now, I do think this is important and fascinating, so I hope you don't go anywhere. But I want to share with you some charts that have been now acknowledged by the likes, I believe, of the Financial Times, the New York, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist. A real honest, data-driven assessment of something that sounded like a partisan talking point perhaps a year ago. But it shows the actual move, the shift of Americans. Did they move to the right, like everyone suggests, this huge rise of the alt-right? Or did they fall off the cliff to the left? We're going to break that down with Hotep Jesus next on The Will Cain Show. I'm still blown away by how many people are doing the Trump dance. High school football, college football, NFL. John Jones at the UFC. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio, market to market across the United States. Hit subscribe at Apple or Spotify, or while you're streaming it live here on YouTube, hit subscribe so you'll always get a reminder, set a reminder at 12 o'clock Eastern time to watch the Will Cain Show. It's continuing to take the world by storm. In fact, I want to talk about this with the founder of the Grift Report, Hotep Jesus, here on the Will Cain Show. What's up, man? This dance, it's not a little thing. I don't think it's a small thing that John Jones is giving his heavyweight belt to Donald Trump. Something is shifted out there. It's different in America.
Absolutely. It's, I think what it is a sigh of relief. Because for the past few years, if you came out with the MAGA hat, you showed any signs of Trumpism, you were canceled, you lost sponsorships, et cetera, et cetera. And now, with Trump in office, then taking over the House, the Senate, UFC, you know how big UFC is for Trump. I think it's more like a sigh of relief, like we can finally return to normalcy. I think a lot of men, especially black men, white men in America, felt like we were being choked out, felt like we weren't allowed to speak out and say how we felt. And now some of those reins being pulled back. MSNBC is making changes. CNN has changed its CEO. They're making changes. The mainstream media left is trying to come back center because the American people have spoken with the ballots. And it's a beautiful thing to see.
It is, yes, a sigh of relief, but it's also, I feel like, a little bit of a clenched fist in defiance. I mean, it is that moment. It's the picture of Donald Trump, fight, fight, fight. In 2016, this didn't exist. You'd see a MAGA hat or two, for example, on the streets of New York. Hotep, I walk now through LaGuardia Airport in New York City, and I see it on sale. And I'm not just talking about MAGA hats. I'm talking about defiance, like mugshot pictures of Donald Trump emblazoned with the words "Never Surrender," on sale in LaGuardia Airport. And it's like it is allowed in, it's the entire culture, or at least a great huge chunk and percentage of the entire culture, yelling enough, I won't hide, I'm done, we're coming out of the closet.
Yeah. I think a large majority of this has to do with the fact that many people weren't paying attention until this problem. Like I said before, many men, so when you look at the black male community, spend a lot of time on Instagram, they spend a time on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. And the only thing they're worried about is, the basketball, the sports, whatever, whatever. And I think what happened was we ignored politics for a little bit of time. But then a lot of the agenda, let's just say, a lot of the rainbow agenda started seeping into our entertainment, started seeping into our sports. It started seeping into the Olympics ceremony. It started seeping into our regular TV programming you might see on Netflix, et cetera, et cetera. And that's when everybody's like, wait, hold on. I've been asleep at the wheel. I think it's sort of woken up many men politically to see, like, what's been going on while I was asleep at the wheel. And I think that's a large part of it. Before, we didn't see it, right? Like we didn't have a problem with the rainbow community, but now it's like smack dab in our face. Also, in the Trump years, we had the pandemic, we had the quarantines, et cetera, et cetera. But the Biden years were rough. It was very rough on the economy. And the working class Americans, you can do a lot of things politically with your agenda. The one thing you can't do is mess with somebody's pocketbook. When you start messing with people's pocketbook, I think it's going to take a little bit of a turn.
I do think that part of it was hidden, this well of cultural support for Donald Trump. But I think a large part of it is what you just described as well, is it was flying under the radar for so many people. I talked about this a few years ago. This is going around from the Financial Times, but this data goes back to 2021. There's just huge debate, and the MSNBCs and the CNNs of the world would have you believe, for example, that anybody that supports Donald Trump had been far right or alt-right, and that the right was getting more authoritarian, and that they controlled the mainstream. I want to walk through data on this. This isn't guesswork. We know what has happened over the course of really the last 30 years in American culture. So let's start with this, Hotep. I want to talk about the Democratic Party's relationship to the voting public. This is represented in a graph that shows the massive distribution. So the American voter, by the way, sees themselves, the vast majority, the highest peak of the American voter sees themselves as center-right, just to the right of moderate. And the American public sees itself as equally distributed then on the ends of this as right and left. Meanwhile, the right's distribution, honestly, is only a slight tick to the right of the average American voter. It's a hump that looks almost identical to the American voter. But the left, Democratic political elites and influencers, their tail and their hump is completely different, and it extends far, far to the progressive left. I hope we're showing that to anybody watching on YouTube or Facebook, but you can see essentially a Democratic political elite and influencer class that is way out of touch with the American voter, Hotep.
So the issue here is that solutions aren't sexy, but problems are. Basically what they did was they took minuscule issues and they put a microscope on them, magnifying glass, and they blew them up to make them seem like, they're larger than life. We had the same problem with BLM when they were talking about police brutality and, the murder of black women, et cetera, et cetera. That may be an issue, but the way they blew it up, it's not that big of an issue. A black male is more likely to be killed by a Big Mac than he is by a police officer, okay? Our diet is the thing that's killing us most. Our spiritual diet, religious diet, our political diet is killing us faster than the cops ever could. So let's put that aside for a second. Because let's be clear, when we're talking about Democrats, we're talking about socialists, and socialists are parasites. So they need somebody or some problem to stick themselves to, so then they campaign on this problem. So they take this problem and they blow it up to the extreme, and they bring it in front of the American people and make the American people think, oh, hey, look, this is an issue. One great example is what our elections were predicated upon this year from the left, and that's abortion. Everybody blew it up and said, oh, abortion's a big thing, abortion's a big thing. But that's actually not true. And that's why they lost, because much of America as my teacher Shaka Akmo said, was most of America is autosexual. Or I shouldn't say most, I should say much of America is autosexual, meaning they're having sex with themselves. They have an addiction to prawn, et cetera, et cetera. You even start seeing situations where we're talking about the birth rate declining and, incels, and men aren't, and then women are gravitating to the top 1%. So if people aren't having sex, why would they care about sexual topics that are on the ballot? So that lets you know that's a huge disconnect. But again, what they do is they take a problem that's not really a problem and they blow it up to make it seem like a problem, make you care, and then they lie to people, right? So they lie to women, and they'll say to women, they'll say things like, "Oh, you're losing your rights," and it's just like, wait, hold on. And then you ask those women, "What rights are you losing?" and they can't answer. So
Wait.
Start with go ahead.
So you're saying that set aside the philosophical debate or even the logical debate on where you think life begins, or the religious debate on abortion. You're saying that as a practical issue that motivates voters, if people are having less sex, and data suggests that Americans aren't having sex, it's not a practical issue that is actually affecting people in their lives in the same way that it might have in the past when it comes to abortion?
That's exactly it. I mean, if I'm not having sex, I'm not having an abortion, which means it just can't connect with me. It can't connect to the average American because the data suggests Americans aren't having sex. So who's having the abortions?
I've never thought about it through that lens. I mean, I've heard the data and I've seen that Japan went down this path and we're going down the same path of people not having sex. But I've never thought about if that's true, abortion stops becoming a practical issue in politics.
It's not an issue because you have to have sex in order to have an abortion. And these people aren't having sex. So when you put abortion on the ballot, people are like, all right, what's the next issue? Because I wish I could have an abortion or an opportunity to have an opportunity.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. All right, but here's one. You said earlier, don't mess with people's pocketbook. Take a look at this. This is, again, the Financial Times. This data, the data comes from an analysis of the American National Election Studies, and this shows whether or not the Democratic Party, to your point, is good on your pocketbook. So for the first time in 80 years, voters associate Democrats more with those socio-cultural issues you're talking about, the microscopic ones you referenced, than with class and economic solidarity. That's who they were in the past, like labor, right? Unions. But look at this. It just craters. Craters represent the working class. There's a blue line for anyone listening on radio or on podcast. Democrats representing the working class. Go back to the 1960s and 30% said yes, they do. That's gone down to about 10% who now see them as standing up for the working class. What's taken its place? Well, here's the issues that took its place in rows. They stand up for marginalized groups. That's more than doubled, almost tripled. They're good on health care. That's gone up over the last 30 years, which may be an issue when it comes to either Obamacare or abortion, is how they're getting that credit. And they're good on climate change, has gone up as well. But they lost in the process what you said a moment ago, pocketbook, working class.
Yeah. So yes, this is true. Once upon a time, they were, good socialists and they worried about the working class, et cetera, et cetera. And then what we had was the genesis of Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter really was the mother of this modern Democratic Party. The Black Lives Matter movement is the one that ushered in the rainbow agenda, as they say, marginalized groups, et cetera, et cetera. That was the spearhead that opened the door for all the rest of these issues. The term BIPOC, POC, Latinx, all of that comes post Black Lives Matter. So Black Lives Matter was the first Trojan horse that came in to insert some of these other issues, but at the same time destroy modern Black politics. The Black community was organizing. If you take a look at the Black community and some of its intelligentsia, it does not look the same as it does today. Our intelligentsia has been completely obliterated. Today, now our intelligentsia, we have to worry about what we call the divine nine or the boule, et cetera, who are beholden to the Democratic Party. But if you look at our intelligentsia of past, was definitely more conservative. They may have voted Democrat, but they're more conservative, while today, these people vote Democrat and they're not even conservative. And a lot of that came through the cultural Marxism that changed the complexion of Black politics. But it has to be Black politics only at the boule level, only at the aristocratic intelligentsia level, because down on the street level, it has not connected, and you saw that in the results.
And that's yes, that level, that whatever it is, Black intelligentsia, but the politically acceptable Black influencer, television host, it's clear from these results, as you point out, they're not in touch with the Black street, the Black voter. And that intelligentsia is lockstep with the white liberal. This also is shown in those charts as well.
Correct.
Hotep. Like, you see white U.S. progressives hold, this whole thing that we're talking about, this data that we're sharing, it's driven by the white progressive. It truly is.
Yes.
And if we're really talking about it, it's overly indexed as well, white women progressives. But look at this one. This shows where people in various demographic groups stand. First on legal immigration, right? So let's talk about, should legal immigration be made easier? Well, Black, Hispanic, and moderate voters are kind of the same. White conservatives, more restrictive. But off the charts, white progressives, way off the charts driving this. Over 80% of white progressives say yes. Even the Black and Hispanic group, which were aligned, they're down below 40%. Now watch this one, because this is kind of like the issue you're talking about when it comes to BLM. Size of police force and scope of the work. Should it be cut? White conservatives, it's like, I don't know, I can't read it, it's so small. We'll call it 3% thinks police force should be cut. Moderate, 20%. Hispanic, about 20%. Black, it jumps up to, we'll call it 37, 38% believe that, some level of defund the police. Here we go, though. White progressives, almost 80%. Looks like about 75% want to drive that issue. The point is, it's white progressives, oftentimes white women progressives, driving all these microscopic issues. It's pulling the Democrats further left and the Black intelligentsia, but not necessarily the Black voter.
Well, the Black intelligentsia gets their marching orders and their funding from the white progressive. See, if, speaking, let's pretend I'm a Black nationalist at this point. If I had to point out an enemy, I would not point at white supremacy. I would look at our boule class, the ones that are taking marching orders and taking funding from the white intelligentsia, a.k.a. the white liberal, the white progressive. The white progressive is not only implanting it in our boule, they start at the university level. But then it goes even further than that. It's in grade school. Like, for example, when Donald Trump wins, my children come home and they're sad and upset, and I say, what happened? And they go, something Trump. You don't have to teach politics in schools for children to understand what is acceptable politics and what is not. If everybody in the school, the kids hear you chatter and they can see your body language, they can, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the white progressive controls so much of our system. It's almost hard to escape it, right? That's why I homeschool my children. But when we look at the Black boule, Black intelligentsia aristocrat getting those checks from the white progressive, what their job is to get us under control. And when I say us, I don't mean the common voter. It is to denigrate anybody who decides to think outside of that group. And that's how they try to keep their control. So if I say, look, I want to go Trump, first of all, I'm not handed a microphone to go speak with them. But what they will do is they'll highlight something we say and go, look, don't be like this guy. And then they blackball you.
Right.
And they create caricatures of you. So, for example, we have the movement Hotep Nation. Hotep Nation was inside of the Black Twitter documentary. Hotep itself was in Hulu shows, and they create a caricature of you and then make you look bad. And so they added even into the cultural aspects of our life. Netflix, Hulu.
But do you think do you think the most powerful tool that has been used, in my mind, I speak, to be honest, only slightly humbly, because I don't deprive myself of my own opinions on this. And just because I'm not black doesn't mean I can't be a witness to history. So I don't ever get that, like, you can't speak on this because you're not a certain ethnicity thing. So I'm only going to speak slightly humbly. So when I say this, I believe it. The most powerful tool that has been used to keep at least, I was going to say black men, but all black people in line on this has been the accusation of being a sellout, a Tom,
Yes.
right? That is incredibly powerful. No one in the black community wants to be a sellout. No one wants to be a Tom. And all of a sudden, by the way, right now, in 2 weeks, I would say in 2 weeks, like 3 weeks ago, if I'm watching an NFL player in the end zone doing the Trump dance, I could expect someone on ESPN to single that dude out and imply that he is a sellout, right? Now there's too many guys. There's too many people doing it, and it's lost some teeth, but it has been the tool.
Well, let's take a look at the Kamala Harris campaign. The Kamala Harris campaign completely failed with the black males, right? At least in their messaging. So BET ran a special that was supposed to be a conversation around the issues for black men. Now, number one, BET has never done this before. They've never had a black male conference. I repeat, they've never done a black male conference. But the black male conference all of a sudden is a thing. Why? Because they want to get this fake black lady in the office, right? Or at least make it look like they can get the job done. Second thing they do is they say on the show, we're going to look at the issues that face black men, the ones that black men care about. Then when you watch the show, it's none of that. It's actually, why won't you vote for Kamala Harris? What's wrong with you? Then, third layer was the denigration and lambastation. They called us uninformed voters, right? Basically said, you're stupid, you're ignorant, you don't know nothing. I don't have to be that smart to know that Trump is going to be better for my bank account. We've experienced it. We've done an A/B test. Trump was in office and Biden was in office.
Yeah.
I don't have to use my brain. I can use my experience. And my experience during the Trump years and that was pandemic years. And it was still, how is the Trump era with the campaign, with the pandemic, better than the Biden years? Like, how is that even possible? So I don't have to use my brain. Right. I have my lived experience, and that's what they tried to take from us. They tried to tell us we were stupid and snatch away our lived experience and tell us it wasn't valid. And I want
to share this last one because I think it's the most compelling to just show the audience how far the left has gone left. Last one here from the Financial Times. Democrats have shifted sharply leftwards on cultural issues in recent years. They've left the median voter behind. This is support of affirmative action and for increasing immigration. You see a line that shows the median voter. Let's take affirmative action. And this dates back to 1996. The median voter pretty much stayed in the same place through 30 years with about, what would it be? I don't know, 20% supporting affirmative action. Again, the Republican voter stayed pretty much the same, hovering at 10% or below. Democrats were up through, and your time frame is right, by the way, Hotep. Up through about 2012, they were slightly to the left of the median voter, with about 25% of them supporting affirmative action. And in a 10-year time frame, it took a hard left turn to the point of 60% who support affirmative action. Let me just do the same thing with increasing immigration. Moderate voters and Republican voters, kind of the same. The moderate voters shifted to the left in about 16, but it started to come back. The leftward voter, the Democratic voter, had a 60 percentage point shift to supporting increases in immigration. They went from about where the moderate voter is, like 20% saying we should cut it, to 40% saying increase immigration. Like, it's a jerk of the steering wheel like you would feel. You'd fall out of the car.
If you do this experiment, go to this website. It's called The Root. And The Root used to be black media. Now I believe it was bought out by Huffington Post. But on that website, it said How immigration hurts the black community. Something to that effect. I'm surprised they left it up. How immigration hurts the black community. You fast forward now, and it's just like, wait, hold on. So you've done a complete 180 on this issue? Well, let's talk about why.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how.
Right.
First of all, you need two groups of people, and they kind of go together. People with mental illnesses and people who want attention. People who want attention sometimes have mental illnesses. And what you do is you give them the microphone, okay? And again, this is where the magnifying glass comes into effect. You see, back in my day, if you wanted attention, you had to put in work. There was no social media. You had to put out a mixtape. You had to get out. You had to promote it, et cetera, et cetera. Nowadays, it's like cosplaying an activist. That's the new career where I can just open up my phone, go to a local protest, yell and scream at the top of my lungs, paint my face, change my hair blue, and now I can become somebody. So really what happened is the Bolsheviks had created a career path on activism, and that's dangerous. You see, before activism wasn't lucrative. You didn't get Elon bucks or revenue. No, you did activism because you actually cared about the problems. Now you get activism and TikTok pays you. Now you get activism and Instagram pays you, and you get sponsors and et cetera, et cetera. But that was ushered in under Black Lives Matter. You go look at, it was a gentleman by the name of DeRay McKesson. When DeRay McKesson came around, and don't forget, there was Occupy Wall Street. And Occupy Wall Street was supposed to be against banks. That got usurped, taken down, et cetera, et cetera. DeRay McKesson pops up. He's connected to Black Lives Matter. And who's his talk sponsored by? Wells Fargo, the big banks. And I'm just like, wait a second, hold on now. That's not, I don't remember big banks supporting activism. That doesn't, connect at all. So it became lucrative to be an activist. Now, what happens when you give money and attention to somebody with mental illness? That's what you get now, right? You get a bunch of people disappointed, leaving Twitter, running the blue sky because they rage quit because they can't deal with the L. And the sad part is I feel bad for some of these people because the Democrats had them believing they were actually going to win this election. Everybody with any common sense knew Donald Trump was going to win this election. All signs pointed to it. Kamala Harris's campaign was crashing left and right. And these people actually believed they were going to win the election. They were on the internet crying. Now they run into all types of different social media networks, running into rage quitting. It's mental illness we're dealing with here. We're not dealing with real political issues. We're dealing with a powerful apparatus using people with mental illness to inflate a problem that is not a part of most people's lives just so they can campaign and raise $1 billion on.
Wow, that is well put. Mental illness made famous on social media and sponsored by Wells Fargo. That is really fascinating. Well put. Hotep Jesus. You can check him out. You should at the Grift Report. He's also on X at Hotep Jesus. He's the author of the Patriot Report. Every time I talk to you, I'm like, we need to talk more because I have so many other issues I'd love to discuss with you. And so let's do that in the future, Hotep. I'd love to have you back on the Will Cain Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, bro.
Okay, there he goes. Hotep Jesus. All right, coming up, Fight on sale at LaGuardia Airport. Is it now? And think about the competition. Really think about this. Is it now the most iconic photo of all time? Next on the Will Cain Show. Fight. Think it's one of the most iconic photos of all time? Like, seriously, let's think about it. What's the competition? It's on sale at LaGuardia. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe, Apple, Spotify, or over on YouTube. Let's bring in the boys in New York. Let's bring in the Willisha. This was a conversation generated on our pre-call meeting. I don't know what inspired this, fellas, but, I did see it on sale. It was actually just one T-shirt that had the fight image on sale at LaGuardia Airport. Yeah. Shockingly, you know what else was there? Was the mugshot. The mugshot.
That's a bad
photo.
Badass one.
Yeah, that's probably why.
I have it up on the screen. The fight is up on the screen.
Real quick, before we do where the fight photo ranks, the mugshot of Donald Trump. Like, what are if you were ranking famous mugshots alone, he's up there. Like, what are they? It's like
Johnny
Al Capone,
Cash.
right?
Capone.
Sinatra.
Johnny Cash has a mugshot.
Did
Yeah.
Elvis
Oh,
Presley have
Sinatra,
one?
he's really young. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen. Is there an Elvis mugshot? I mean, the
That's what I
Trump
recall.
mugshot's right there now. Like,
It's a president.
It's top
That's
2 or 3.
insane.
Easy.
How can you beat a president with a mugshot?
yeah, James, I hear you. Yeah, right.
Bill Gates is in there.
Yeah, I mean,
That's insane.
Bill Gates has a mugshot?
Yeah. 1977.
Is it real?
Yeah, he did. What did he do?
Driving without a license and running a stop sign in 1977.
He looks happy in it. He's
He
smiling.
looks
He's like,
great.
"Hey."
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Sinatra's
Do you
2.
smile? What do you do in the mugshot?
It depends what you did
If I get
as a
arrested
crime.
tomorrow. Okay. If I get arrested tomorrow for driving without a license like Bill Gates, and I get taken in and I'm standing there for the mugshot, tell me what I do, guys. Do I smile or do I scowl? Or do I go flat face?
Flat
what do
face.
you do?
In between.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's tough.
Like, Donald Trump is defiant.
What did Scotty Scheffler do? Did he even have one?
I don't know.
When they pulled him over and arrested
Gotta be
him?
yeah.
Well, I remember
Gotta be
they
a Scotty
asked him
Scheffler
after it. They
mugshot.
were like, "Scotty, do you want to do the full ordeal, or do you want to just go to the golf course?" He's like, "Nah, let's do it."
Is Tim Allen's on there too?
Sat in his jail
Yeah.
cell, he said.
No, Tim Allen's is on here. Elvis Presley, 1970 is on here.
Okay.
Elvis was.
So you think, Dan,
Yeah.
it's what you do. So if it's a small crime, smile. If it's a big crime,
Yeah.
scowl.
Yeah. If you get a DUI, you cannot smile. If you are accused of murder, you're not smiling. If
Well, it depends on
you
if you're a serial
petty
killer.
theft, you could smile.
It also probably
Wait a
depends
minute.
if you did
I only
it or-
disagree with one of those. I think you could smile in the DUI.
Really? Depends
I'm
on
not making light of the DUI. I'm not making light of the DUI. I think it's drunk driving and the accidents
course.
associated and so forth. But the drunk guy smiling in his mugshot versus looking sad like Tiger's mugshot. That's no good. That's no good.
I think you don't have a choice if you're drunk to smile. So I think you're going to smile either way.
You know that when Trump went to do his mugshot, that he thought about this for a little while. He's like, "All right, how are we gonna do it?" The imagery. He knew this was coming,
Absolutely.
and he goes in there, gets the right angle.
Okay, this takes us back to fight. So that photo, absolutely iconic. The suggestion on our pre-show call from you guys is it is now in the discussion, and perhaps the leader in the clubhouse, maybe your number one draft pick here, as the most iconic photo of all time. Now, I think that people who listen who aren't maybe fans of Donald Trump or even consider themselves apolitical or moderate, like, oh, come on, that's like partisan pom-poms. No, I think you could step back and actually say, objectively, what will be in the history books 100 years from now? Now, give me the competition on the things we're talking about or that have already lasted 100 years of iconic photos.
Well, here we grabbed a few of them. So this first one is the moon landing photo, which I think is extremely iconic. Some people say not real.
Fake?
But yeah, we'll go.
I was waiting for
Oh, I thought you were going to
Patrick
say
on that.
extremely fake.
It's extremely fake. It's good Photoshop. They had really good Photoshop back then. But I don't know where that ranks among.
This is Neil Armstrong. Is it his first step?
Yep, he's.
My
Yeah,
return is unfortunately not working right now, so
We'll work
I'll have
on
to
that.
listen to you guys. Is this first step or is this planting the American flag? What is this?
This is just on the
Photo.
moon, just kind of out there. I don't think it's his first step because the rover's not behind him and the flag's not with him.
Okay.
But
yeah,
just-
well, since we can't even narrow it down,
This is
what
at the-
would be? It's not. It doesn't win. Like
Yeah.
I think if this isn't either or right now, I'm going fight over
Okay.
that.
All right.
Plus, it's real.
All right. Next one is the construction workers on a beam in New York City, circa probably the 20s, I believe.
You know what's funny about that picture?
That's
probably right around where Trump Tower is now. That's probably
that photo's iconic.
Yeah.
It's iconic. They're eating lunch, aren't they? Sitting there with their legs dangling off the steel girder.
Bold.
yeah.
That photo, I don't know, man. It's so much in one thing. Like, it's a bunch of men doing things that are masculine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like communicating the ability to do your job while not being overcome by fear. Like, even me listening to and thinking about that photo in my mind actually makes my palms sweat. Like, that actually is really that. I think I'm not a fear of heights guy, but I think I am a fear of heights guy at the same time.
Definitely.
And then of course there's the whole like men who built America aspect of it, right? And the skyline of New York City being built. That one might beat fight.
It's the spirit of America. It's the spirit of New York. But that's also the MSG rally. It's the same spirit there. It all comes back to Trump at
Those
this
guys
point.
face death, so I'm just saying.
Well.
So did Trump, I guess.
Well, so did Trump in the fight photo.
Yeah,
that's
that's
after
true.
an assassination attempt with blood dripping down his face with his fist raised in the air, yelling fight.
I
Like,
stand
that's like
corrected.
a real moment of inspiration.
All right, so we have one more that I think this one might overtake the fight. This is the Tiananmen Square picture with the guy standing in front of the tanks. I mean, it's extremely iconic.
Of course.
I mean, Banksy,
Of course.
you know,
It's the power of one man, the power of one individual standing up to oppressive power, symbolized perfectly with that tank and that one individual. What knocks it, Dan, honestly, is it's just not America. I'm not trying to be jingoistic.
Wow.
I'm just saying, like,
Wow.
it's awesome.
How dare.
It is. It is.
It didn't go that great for him.
How dare I gravitate to films? How dare I gravitate to films in the English language? How dare I gravitate to music that I can actually understand? How dare I connect with things that have part of my history?
This is what I'm here for, to push back.
How dare I?
I'm here to push back.
And when you say
Do
one
what
man,
every human being does.
one man pushing up against an oppressive force, that's Trump again.
Wow.
Yeah.
you're
What
not
are some
getting
other ones
a-
that we
a
might not
nomination,
include? There's
James.
the
Couple 9/11 ones were pretty moving. You have the fallen man.
yeah.
You got Bush down there. We can hear you.
Why the first plane going in?
Iwo Jima.
Bush is a moment. Bush is
Yeah,
a
it's better on
moment,
video.
but it's not a photo that I think of. Yeah. Same thing with the first pitch at Yankee Stadium. I think that's a moment in video, but it's not a photo that I think of.
Actually, I have
Incredible.
I have a framed photo of that in my
Of course
room.
you do.
So
Of course you do. It's above your bed.
How do you know that? What? Interesting.
I think it's fresh, and I think it's going to be hard because it's fresh to remove yourself, because what we're trying to really analyze is, like, how does it stand the time of history? And I'm just here to tell you, I think fight will be at least among, if not above, everything we're discussing on one of the most iconic photos in the history of America. All right, that's going to do it for me today here on The Will Cain Show. Same time, same place tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. I will see you again next time.